Okay. Good morning, and thank you for registering for Riley O'Reilly, Deciphering Irish Immigrant Passenger Lists. I'm Kate Kisselstein, and as Amanda said, I'm one of the librarians here at Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department. I'll take you through some general information on passenger lists first, then give a brief overview of dates relating to Irish immigration before we delve into the case study of one family's immigrant ancestors. Rest assured, there'll be time for questions at the end. There were a few main issues with passenger lists, especially before regulations were put in place in the 1800s. Location. Initially, passenger lists, while created at the point of departure, were often kept at the port of entry. Historically, the 5 major ports of entry on the Atlantic side of the US were New York, Baltimore, Boston, Philadelphia, and New Orleans, with numerous minor ports being used as well. And that doesn't include those immigrants who may have landed in Canada or Mexico first and crossed the border. 2, we're probably all familiar with the myth that immigrants' surnames got changed at Ellis Island, but the actual issue was more likely one of education. If you hadn't learned how to spell your own name properly, how could you tell someone else how to spell it? And the last piece is the information contained on the list was handwritten by the ship's company personnel. And as we'll see, not all had the best penmanship, which could cause issues for future transcribers and genealogists. Okay, the first type of passenger records that we run into are cargo manifest passenger lists, which are dates prior to 1820. These, the lists of the early period are not preserved in the National Archives. So over 1 million immigrants came to the United States before 1820. Few names of passengers were recorded on ship's logs or by the government, so you must rely on books and indexes compiled from other sources. Any original passenger list bearing their name that may still exist might be found in any archive, museum, courthouse, basement, or attic in the US or overseas, with the most likely places being Spain, France, or Great Britain. According to the National Archives, documentation of immigrants entering the United States varied significantly from 1789 to 1819 because there was not a singular entity creating and maintaining records of immigrants. The Customs Bureau oversaw ports starting in 1789, but with limited exceptions, such as New Orleans and Philadelphia, which consistently recorded arrivals for spans of multiple years. It is difficult to find documentation at the National Archives of immigrants to the United States during this early time frame. The next type of passenger records we come across are customs passenger lists. And the Steerage Act, this was because of the Steerage Act of 1819, until January 1820, the United States government did not require the passenger list, but the new Steerage Act required ships' captains to provide a manifest of passengers boarded at foreign ports, and it required each vessel to carry a specific quantity of provisions for each passenger with an entitlement to compensation should supplies prove deficient. And these lists contained the basic information only, which was the name of the ship's master or captain, the point of embarkation, the date and port of arrival, and then they would only include each passenger's name, sex, age, occupation, and nationality. And that's if everything got recorded. The next type of passenger record would be the immigration passenger list, which definitely became much more detailed. So this was because the Immigration Act of 1891 introduced further documentation as it required that information be collected about immigrants entering the United States overland from Canada and Mexico as well. It is interesting to note that approximately 40% of the foreign passengers arriving in Canada were actually bound for the United States. So the creation of border crossing records began capturing a large pool of immigrants that likely would not have shown up on previous arrival documents. The act also created a superintendent of immigration who oversaw immigration inspectors at ports of entry and barred polygamists, persons convicted of crimes of moral turpitude, and those suffering from diseases, which created a provision for medical examinations. So as you can see, it included the information that was required on the previous lists, plus all of this information here. So, and the key thing with these to note, if your ancestor came after 1891, is that they would have the last place of residence, as well as the name and address of a relative in their native country. So that can definitely, if they came 1891 or later, you'll probably have a lot more information to go on than earlier folks. So here's the start of a timeline. And this is pre-famine and famine Irish migration. According to author Claire Santry, around 1650, the British authorities introduced a series of penal laws that limited the freedoms and opportunities for Irish Roman Catholics and, to a lesser extent, Protestant dissenters. The latter were more economically independent than their Catholic neighbors, and they believed they would find tolerance and greater freedom in North America. This trickle became a steady stream by the 1720s, with Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and ports in Delaware being the most popular ports of entry for the new settlers. By 1790, the Irish immigrant population of the U.S. numbered nearly 450,000, 2/3 of which originated from Ulster, Ireland's northernmost province. The Steerage Act of 1819 was the first law in the United States regulating the conditions of transportation used by people arriving and departing by sea. In addition to regulating conditions in ships, the act also required ships' captains to deliver and report a list of passengers with their demographic information to the district collector. Prior to this, the United States had no laws restricting immigration. Ireland's potato harvest was struck down by a catastrophic blight in 1845 that left many without their main or only source of food. The poorest Irish faced starvation, disease, and homelessness when the crop continued to fail in the following 3 years. That first exodus in 1846 numbered 215,000, some even opting to travel during the harsh winter months that, generally speaking, ships tended to avoid due to ice and bad weather. Those who couldn't afford passage to the United States directly sailed to Canada instead. In 1847 alone, some 200 ships had made the crossing to British Canada, and 1/3 of the passengers, or roughly 64,000 individuals, perished on the journey. Yet during the famine years, whether overland through Canada or directly to the US, an estimated 1 million souls managed to arrive. They were not necessarily warmly welcomed, as the majority were poor, spoke only Irish, and had few skills and no financial resources to speak of. So after the famine, if your ancestor immigrated to the United States after the famine, they may have had an easier passage, but not necessarily an easier time of things once they arrived in America. Author Claire Santry states that when the economy was strong, Irish immigrants to America were relatively welcome. But when the boom times faded away, as they did in the mid-1850s, social unrest followed. Irish immigrants could often be perceived as taking jobs from Americans. The post-famine migration period also saw the familiar phrase, "no Irish need apply," in job advertisements and on the rise of anti-immigration nationalist group, the Know Nothing Party, as well as others of a similar mindset, amidst the growing distrust of foreigners. Yet the possibility of greater opportunities still brought additional waves of Irish to America's shores. By the start of the 20th century, Irish-born immigrants made up 2.12% of the US population. More importantly, Irish Americans, those Americans born to Irish parents, made up 6.53%. And by 2013, the number of Americans claiming Irish heritage was more than 33 million, or nearly 11% the total population, which is nearly 5 times the total population of Ireland, which is 6.4 million. It's important to note that the creation of Northern Ireland didn't occur until 1921, with the Republic of Ireland being created the following year. The last great wave of Irish immigration to the US that was affected by the 1891 Immigration Act was the time period between the creation of those countries through to the Troubles, or the Northern Ireland conflict, which ended with the signing on the 10th of April, 1998 of the Good Friday Agreement. One resource that proved useful for today's case study was the famine immigrants, as the volumes contain the exact dates of arrivals of ships and their passengers. While it's true that not every Irish famine immigrant sailed to New York from Ireland, this resource is a good place to dig for more information. And a caveat, the ships are listed by date of arrival, but you may be able to narrow that down by using the National Archives Access to Archival Databases site. A resource for those who have ancestors that didn't come during the famine or travel to New York is the Passenger and Immigration Lists Index by P. William Philby, which is simply known as Philby's or Philby Books. First published in 1980, it has had regular supplements published by the Gale Research Company every year, and Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department holds the print version of these titles, as will other genealogy centers and libraries. It's also available through Ancestry.com with a paid subscription, or MyHeritage Library Edition for free. The only caveat there is the online ones may not have the most recent supplement years available yet, which the most recent one is for 2023. All this leads us to my case study, which deals with a ship sailing across the stormy Atlantic from Sligo, Ireland to New York City, New York in early 1850. While the time frame puts this towards the middle of the Great Famine, the US had only recently started requiring customs passenger lists containing the basic information. And this was no short cruise, as sailing vessels could take up to 12 weeks to reach their destination. And I just have to mention that the image you're viewing is of the An Gorta Mór, the Great Hunger Memorial, located in the Cambridge Commons in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It commemorates the millions of Irish who died of starvation, as well as the hundreds of thousands who migrated to America during that time. I often walked past it on my way to the bus, and it made me want to know more about this time period and the Irish who risked their lives to escape the famine by fleeing their homeland to start over in America. And I have to apologize because I said this was Riley O'Reilly, but it actually could have been McKenneth McKinner for the name, because that's the family name that we dealt with for the case study. So with this image, you can see an example of the penmanship I mentioned, which caused confusion for transcribers. The ship's name is actually Dromahair, but as we'll see, some online records have it as Dromahan. The close-up view perhaps helps you see why that the error was an easy one to make, given that transcribers are not supposed to extrapolate, but simply enter what they see. The family that is the subject of this case study are the McNiffs: Patrick, his wife Winifred, and their children. Family lore had it that 4 brothers emigrated from County Cavan, sailing from Sligo, Ireland, and arriving on New York City on the 26th of April, 1850, on board a ship named the Dromahan. One brother got off in Boston, Patrick got off in New York City, and the third supposedly went on to Australia, with the possibility of the 4th brother actually being a sister, an infant named Catherine. Supposedly one of the brothers went by the name Kinney. However, their descendants had been unable to track down the manifest for the Dromahan to confirm any of this. So that's where we start our search. So I begin the initial search with one of our databases, the Ancestry, and hopefully you're seeing the website for Ancestry Library Edition. But I'm not starting with a general search. One of the options in the search drop-down menu is immigration and travel. With this option, I can enter specific information. So since we're looking for the McNiff family, I'll start with that. And we have their arrival date as the 26th of April, 1850. And I'll just put in the state of New York and leave the gender blank with a nationality of Irish. As we can see, there's Catherine, Hugh, Kinney, and Pat. And fortunately, I knew I'd already get these results, which is why I did enter as much information as I did. Now, Kinney McNiff is listed as the age of 24, which would put them born in 1826. And it says they sailed on the ship the Dromahan. If this were if we go to the record, if this were the actual ship, we might be able to look that up and see an image of it. And which might also include a photo. But we'll go back because I know there's another one which actually has an image. And here's the actual passenger list. And if I zoom in, you can see there's Pat, Kinney, and Catherine. And if I continue down, I see there's another one where it says the ship's name is the Dromahan for Hugh.
Hey, Kate, right now we're just seeing the Ancestry Library Edition search slide. We're not seeing what you're looking at.
Okay. Let me see if I stop sharing for a second. I'm sorry about that. Let's just share my screen then. All right.
There we go. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. So I've clicked on Hugh's record. And the source says this is from the original data came from the Famine Irish Entry Project, 1846 to 1851, and it's held at the National Archives. Let's see. And if I go back, let me show you. Here's the information that I searched for under the Immigration and Travel tab. And the reason you'd pick that is if you've got a rough idea of their arrival, you're able to enter that information there. And it helps pinpoint the records further. So in any case, I know that the National Archives probably has additional information. So their website is actually going to be my next stop. Here. So now we'll head over to the National Archives. And I start by searching for as you can see, I've already done this search here. The Famine Irish Entry Project. And it says the series is available through AAD. So if we go back to research our records, we find AAD is their access to archival databases. And to find the ship, what they have for passenger lists, you click on Immigrants under genealogy and personal history. you'll click on immigrants, and then I see records for passenger. The second hit is the one that we're looking for. This is who arrived at the port of New York during the Irish famine. So, and we want to search the passenger records. And it kept my last search, of course. But yes, you would go in with the last name. And then I happen to know that their date of arrival was, thanks to Ancestry, we've double checked. The date of arrival was April 26, 1850. And we can click on search. And we find that there were 4 passengers. There's Hugh. And we see that there's Hugh. Here's Pat. And we can see it says born in Great Britain, but that was due to the technical issues. But it does show they sailed on the Dromahair. But the most interesting one that I found was looking at Kinney, where we find, and I can't zoom in, but the sex code says you, unknown, which is very interesting because Catherine McNiff is listed as born at sea. So I came to realize that there's a good possibility that Kinney is not a brother, and that Catherine is actually Patrick's daughter, and that Kinney must be Winnie instead of Kinney. So, when I viewed the record for her, when I viewed this record viewed this passenger list in Philby's, 2 others on the same ship were also listed as gender unknown. So it was not uncommon for that to happen. But Kinney warrants a further search, especially now that we know Catherine was born at sea. So we go back to Ancestry. See if okay, there we go. So in order to prove my theory that Kinney McNiff is actually Patrick's wife, Winifred, I want to start with a general record search first. So we'll go to all categories. And I start with Winifred. And we know she was born about 1824. Well, I know that now. Actually, I should take that out because I didn't know it at the time when I initially got this question. And we're looking for census, roughly the 1850s. And I see that my second hit is for a Winford in Middlebury, Vermont. And this is looking like a good possibility because there's Patrick and there's Catherine. So and the great thing with looking on Ancestry is they will provide this handy little pop out here, and a lot of times they'll highlight the lines you're looking for as well. So we can see that Winifred was the one who spoke to the enumerator. Most likely Patrick was out working. And the interesting thing here is that Catherine was, when I first discovered this, it listed Catherine as 2 years old and being born in Vermont, which was interesting considering I knew Patrick had arrived in 1850. So I ended up doing a search for Winifred, going back, looking for records dating back to 1848 and earlier. But so when I had initially looked at this, I hadn't yet learned of the National Archives database. So try as I might, though, I never did find an earlier record for Winifred coming over separately. So that's what led me to believe that that Kinney was indeed Winifred. And as far as we've been able to tell, that is that I've been able to tell, that is the case. So at least this was the earliest record I could find on this side of the pond for Winifred. So go back. So now I suppose you're saying that's all well and good. You had a case history where you knew the family name, you knew when they came, you knew roughly what the name of the ship might be, and you had at least some of the names. But what do you do if, like me, you have a great-great-grandfather who came over to the US sometime in 1888, 1889, or 1890? It depends on which census record you look at. So, and what if they didn't come during the famine years? The Glazer's Famine Immigrants book is not going to be of much help if they didn't come during that time frame or land in New York. So I'm highlighting these sites as these are some of the sites that I consulted to narrow down the search for my great-great-grandfather, who I have to let you know, I still have not found his arrival record, but they've helped narrow down my search. So the first one is the Irish Genealogy Toolkit, which is Claire Santry's website, and she has articles and links to free and paid databases, including National Archives of Ireland and many others. It's a great resource if you want to do further reading, if you're looking for a quick spot to do some further reading into the history of Ireland and events that may have affected your ancestors. And the National Archives of Ireland, according to Santry, their dedicated genealogy site takes pride of place among the top free Irish genealogy databases. Its most popular resources are the fully digitized 1901 and 1911 census returns. In addition to a searchable index, yay for index, you can download images of the census returns, including the household returns and the enumerator's returns. And this means you could pinpoint the location of your ancestor and have a better idea of where they might have the port that they might have sailed from in Ireland. This next one, Roots Ireland, does require a paid subscription, but they offer just a 24-hour subscription if you're willing to just really dive in and do a ton of digging. So it's from the Irish Family History Foundation, and it contains the largest online collection of Irish parish register transcriptions and holds transcripts from civil records of birth, marriage, and death for at least half of all the historical counties. These are not just index entries, they are transcriptions of the full birth, marriage, and death certificates, which I can attest to. I ended up ordering my great-great-grandfather's birth record, and which was very interesting because for 1868, it was it's all handwritten. So it was just, it's really great to be able to do, and it didn't cost a lot. The database, Roots Ireland's database, also holds census records. Some of these may be free elsewhere, such as with the National Archives of Ireland, but some are exclusive to Roots Ireland. And you can narrow down your search before you actually, so that you can find records, to see what records they might have before you pay for the subscription. Now, this last one is one that came in handy because even though my great-great-grandfather was born in 1868, which predates the creation of Northern Ireland, the records are still held in the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. And it was established in 1923 following the partition of the island into the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And it's the official repository for public records for the 6 counties of Antrim, Armagh, Derry, Londonderry, Down, Fermanagh, and Tyrone. And I discovered that my great-great-grandfather immigrated from County Tyrone and was able again to find his birth record, which helped pin down how old he was when he immigrated to the US. It's an essential and free Irish genealogy and history site for researchers hunting details of their ancestors from Northern Ireland, and offers multiple online databases. So if you ever need any help, do reach out to us here at the local history and genealogy department at Central Library, because we're happy to answer questions and provide guidance. Thank you.